I guess because it is such a matter of discussion across the country, and because it's highly likely that none of us will do any shows on this topic, I thought maybe at the beginning of this backstage episode of Right Angle with Bill Whittle and Stephen Green and myself, Scott Ott, that we might want to just kick around our thoughts on the passing of Senator John McCain. Now, Bill, tell me for sure that you're not doing episodes on this.
I am not.
Okay, Stephen?
I am not.
Clear. Okay, neither am I. Okay, so this will be for members only in that case. Steve, John McCain had kind of a fraught relationship with his nominal party, and the better angels of our nature would indicate to me that that shouldn't matter at this point. What say you?
Yeah, my support for John McCain in 2008 was best summed up. A buddy of mine needed some medical work done, so he was selling these election bumper stickers. Had a nice little headshot of McCain, and then the text in big letters said, "F it, McCain." And then in little text underneath, it said, "He's the least objectionable Democrat running." And I thought that was great, and I bought a couple dozen to, help my buddy with his medical bills, and I gave most of them away, and I stuck one very proudly on the back of my Jeep. And when I say I stuck it on the back of my Jeep very proudly, I mean I took it off the day after the election.
I was thinking of you this morning because I read an article, I want to say it was in The Atlantic, where the columnist was talking about McCain's career, Steve, and basically saying that things got better when he moved away from, I believe the phrase was, his mindless libertarianism.
John McCain was never a libertarian, not by any stretch. No. He made his bones as part of the Keating Five when he was still in Congress. And his solution to his own weakness in taking tainted money, let's say, from the Keating brothers, I think it was the Keating brothers, maybe I'm thinking
this is related to the SNL crisis,
yeah, the SNL
right?
crisis, yeah.
Before the birth of most of our viewers, yeah.
Yes, his solution for his lack of character as a congressman was to try and impose unconstitutional restrictions on everybody else. So calling him a libertarian is a real stretch.
Maybe the writer meant before that. I don't know. But Bill Whittle, when you, we heard last week that Senator McCain was going to cease treatments for this glioblastoma form of cancer, a very aggressive brain cancer that he was suffering. And then it was a matter of hours that we heard that Senator McCain had passed away. I remember standing at the 2008 convention, and Steve, you were there, and seeing Cindy McCain speaking, and then her husband came out, and it was kind of a stirring moment. I mean, there was a certain sense in which you looked at that guy and his wife, and you thought, these are solid Americans, and with much about their character to recommend emulation by others.
Yeah. I like to think, and I'm quite convinced that I'm not the kind of person who would ever gloat over anybody's death, even Noam Chomsky or Bill Ayers. You wouldn't hear a great deal of sincere eulogizing on my part, but I would never, gloat over it. It seems to be primarily the purview of our friends on the other side of the aisle. The thing about when somebody dies, Scotty, is it's a chance to really take their entire life into account rather than just the part of it that you've just been watching. What I had heard, I don't know if this is true, I've heard it anecdotally from a number of people, that McCain had essentially several weeks before the election given up and said, I'm not going to be the guy who stopped the first black president. If that story's true, then that is a just utterly disgraceful position.
Well, and if it's true, it sounds more like
he's the guy who wouldn't give up as a POW under some of the most severe torture. Yeah,
this is the point I'm going to make. So I kind of, it has the ring of truth to it, and a bunch of other things that John McCain did to particularly seem to sabotage what we would probably call, the conservative wing of the Republican Party, of which he, I don't think, was a member. So ever since the 2008 election, and since then, he's been a constant and growing disappointment to me. I'll never remember him I'll never forget him rather walking onto the floor to cast the deciding vote on Obamacare with this cat that ate the canary smile. Is he going to take the country in one direction, or isn't he?
Yeah. When he essentially almost single-handedly defeated the repeal of Obamacare.
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct.
And all just to stick it to Trump, to deny Trump a domestic victory.
Yeah, and so I think most people would agree that Trump is pretty petty about these kind of things, and for McCain to go to that level with the kind of consequences to America that entailed, that wasn't just a chance to get a personal swipe in. I mean, that had a profound effect on everybody in this country. I find that to be just utterly reprehensible. But as I said, the thing about somebody dying is you get a chance to take their whole life into consideration. And when you hear the story of a man who can't raise his elbows above his shoulders because of all the times he was hanging by ropes in Vietnamese prison, who had all of his teeth knocked out with rifle butts simply because he's an American pilot, that mitigates pretty much anything for me, to be honest with you. You know, there are certain single acts of dishonor that can taint a person's career for their entire lives. And likewise, I think there are certain ennobling moments, and I don't mean moments like a few seconds, I mean periods, that essentially ennobles them for an entire life, unless they do something genuinely horrific, you know, like mass murder or genocide or something. So, on balance, look, anybody who runs for president of the United States that's courage.
Yeah.
And and while I think McCain was always rather a flawed guy, I think he became more flawed as he stayed in power longer and longer. I think power really did corrupt him to the degree that it corrupts everybody. But with all that said, you cannot undo the heroism of what he did. And if his entire political reputation was based on that, that's certainly a better thing to be based on than having handed out forms in Chicago.
Yeah. He served extra years in that POW camp under those torturous conditions in that hellhole, rather than give the North Vietnamese a propaganda victory and disgrace his country. That is a man.
His father was chief of naval operations. They wanted to get him out early.
Yeah, that was.
No, that's unimpeachable.
Yeah,
it's unimpeachable.
Yeah, I guess I have the same thought. I mean, you can't not think about the totality of the guy's career, and it's probably something better left to, you know, a little historical distance so we can evaluate it more dispassionately. But certainly his act of heroism and tenacity and courage in the face of probably the most intense kind of suffering that any of us could imagine having to endure at the hands of another, redeemed him from his future sins, if you want to call
perfectly
it that
said.
way.
That's exactly what I was trying to say.
Yes, thank you.
And I think any of us has to acknowledge, and I don't just mean the three of us here, but I think you have to acknowledge that I'm kind of glad that the public doesn't get to do a total review on me.
That's also a good point.
Amen.
You know, I'm glad that the only one I have to stand before to give an accounting is the one who
Scotty,
has already paid the price.
I'm just paying your checks, dude. You don't owe me any kind of moral, abasement or anything. It's just an employer relationship. As long as you deliver the shows on time, then that's fine with me.
We're good.
And I do remember that time when you and I met face to face, and you said, "Arise, I am only a man."
I did.
And so that was.
I say that to everybody.
It's Bill's version of hello, nice to meet you.
But that is, you know, I don't know. I guess it's part of me that instinctively, sort of the lesser angels of my nature, immediately goes, you know, well, I feel sorry for his family, but you know, this guy was hardly a hero of the Republican Party. On the other hand, I think there are things that rise above party, and
also true.
The melodrama unfolding at the White House over flag lowering and raising, and Jonathan Karl from CNN shouting questions at the president and demanding that he make a statement about John McCain, and why won't he make a statement about John McCain, and all of that kind of stuff really needs to fade into the distance as the box sits atop the catafalque and a nation pauses for a moment and says, you know, there are some people who are willing to give it all and more than you would think was possible to give in order to maintain the dignity and integrity that the uniform means, that the flag means. And so I'll hold that vision of John McCain in my head and try to forget about the rest in light of my own faults. Let's leave it loosely at that.
Yes.
So, we're not doing a show, of course, on that, as we just spent the last 15 minutes talking about it, but only you, our members,
I'm glad you did.
Get to see, our thoughts on this. Bill, you are hosting the members-only episode this week, in addition to the regular episode. Would you care to go first and take any chance that Steve and I have of getting a decent topic?
Yes.
Yes,
I may be covering one of 13 stories that I'm about to recount.
Oh, wow. It's Bill's lightning round.
I think for my main issue, I want to talk about Burning Man. Not so much the event, so much as the kind of unnoticed undercurrent of extreme libertarianism that actually still exists in American culture. I mean, I find it interesting that this event, which is like Coachella and a couple of other events, just the kind of defining events of a period in time. I just find it interesting that Burning Man is pretty much the antithesis of the social justice warrior scene. That the entire point of going out to the desert, which in itself is a remarkable thing, to be honest. I think Burning Man is really quite incredible.
And by the way, for those of us who don't live in hippy-dippy California, could you just, in a sentence, say what Burning Man actually is? I've read a bunch of articles about it, but every article I've read assumes that I already know what it is.
Bacchanalia in the desert.
Yeah,
okay.
That's basically it. But it becomes is it in Arizona?
Nevada, I think.
Nevada.
Yeah.
Wherever it is. In any event, you'd think I'd know. It becomes the third biggest city in Nevada for the length of time that it's on there. People come from all over the country.
Is there a second large city in Nevada?
Reno, yeah.
Reno. Yeah.
Okay.
The biggest little city in the world.
They come out there and they park in concentric circles, and it looks almost like a space colony from the air. And when I say it's in the middle of the desert, it's in the middle of a salt lake.
Yeah, there is nothing there. If you don't bring enough water, they won't let you in because there's no water. There's nothing.
That's right. But once you're in, it is absolute 100% hands-off freedom.
Yeah, it's Vegas without the stuffiness.
I mean, if you want to walk around naked, you walk around naked. If you want to build a car that's a fire-breathing dragon and have propane and propane accessories attached to the car, then then that's what you do. And it's a place of tremendous creativity, a tremendous amount of just plain Dionysian debauchery. But I do find it interesting that it is, as I say, I think it's the antithesis of what the left has become. And certainly, I just want to imagine what a social justice warrior would have to say, walking through Burning Man, because they're
so
basically
you're suggesting that it's
not
not populated with a bunch of those kind of people already? That's not who goes?
I don't think so, no. I can't imagine that. I can't imagine that. Because, the thing about a social justice warrior is you're all in, right? If you're going to be one of these people and get the badge, and the little enamel pin, you got to be outraged all across the board. So even if you don't see any overt color racism, there's a great deal of objectification of women, which is done on the part of the women that go there, and there's plenty of stuff to complain about. And for professional complainers, I would imagine it's pretty target-rich environment. But I am interested in the libertarian aspect of it, and I'm interested in I'm interested in the release valve aspect of it. Not only for the people that go there, but I just think America's a better place because there is Burning Man. It is not Woodstock, because they can't afford to be Woodstock. I mean, Woodstock was filthy, just utterly filthy. It took weeks to clean that place up when the hippies were done with it, and they were rolling around in the mud and doing all this. You don't have that luxury in the middle of the desert. You have to have maybe that's what it is about it. Is a certain amount of discipline has to be imposed upon.
Just the privation of the environment.
That's right. This utter disregard for everything. In order to be part of this utter disregard for all rules, you have to be fairly disciplined and follow a certain set of rules, and that kind of interests me too. So I just wanted to talk about it as a cultural event. By the way, a dust storm came up on this one, and they closed the entrance for a while. People had to wait 10 hours to get in there. But I don't think most people could tell 10 hours had elapsed,
So probably not, yeah.
Perhaps it's my sheltered existence, but I'm like, there's an entrance to the desert? Like, can't you just
There
go
is.
in anywhere?
No. And the reason they call it Burning Man is because the first one, they made a giant totem of a man, and at the end of the festival, they set it on fire. And they do that every year, and they try to make it a little more spectacular every time.
Did they dance around saying, "Oh, Baal, save us"?
But this is the thing. This is interesting because you would think that they would, but this is not the vibe I get off of Burning Man, and that interests me quite a lot. It's kind of like if you'd accidentally put some water into the Continental Congress's drinking supply, and all of the founding fathers were just absolutely hallucinating and wandering around in the desert. This is kind of what you'd get. You'd get just the strangest, weirdest behavior, but there seems to be something fundamentally decent about the people that go there. I can't put my finger on it, but anyway, that's the whole point.
Boy, that's a headline I haven't read.
There's a difference between debauchery and pure evil.
There was
Indeed.
And there are some very, very well-ordered people who are not only not debaucherous, but strictly methodical.
Well, I saw the parking arrangement
ordered.
is very neat.
Well, my point is
Very impressive.
My point is, you didn't get a lot of bacchanalia on the part of Hydra,
John Adams.
let's say.
You're going the other way. Sorry.
Yeah. So you don't get a lot of debauchery from him, but you do get pure evil, and I don't get that vibe from Burning Man. So that's what I want to talk about.
That's
the main topic.
I was listening to a podcast yesterday, and it was an interview between Jordan B. Peterson and Steven Pinker, I believe, who's written a book called Enlightenment Now. And one of the things they were talking about was this sort of strange tension between a society that has a relatively high degree of aberrant behavior resulting in criminality, but also a very high degree of creative behavior.
There's no question that the two are related.
Yeah.
It's not that the criminality and the creativity are related. I please bring that point up because that's a critically important point.
Okay.
It's not that creativity and criminality are related, because they're not. I think they're the antithesis of each other. I think criminals are people with essentially zero creativity. This
They
idea
can't
of the
create,
master
so they have
heist,
to take.
the master heist, that just
Doesn't
never
exist.
happens. So it's not that creative people have criminal tendencies or vice versa. It's that a society that's loose enough to tolerate a certain amount of criminal divergence is also loose enough to allow a certain amount of creative genius.
And I think that's what Peterson and Pinker were getting at. I think that's
I hope you please bring that point up because it's a really, really interesting point to me. Really interesting.
And I'm hoping it's that podcast I was listening to and not some other of the dozens of podcasts I listened to, I'm pretty sure. Okay, so that's your regular episode, Bill.
Correct, yeah.
What have you reserved unto the members alone?
Unto the members alone, I thought I would do a story I saw because, I've covered this whole kind of men identifying as women, getting involved in women's sports and, cheating their way into the state championships. I've talked about that many times. And I saw a story about this young woman who is playing for her high school football team as a receiver, not a punter, by the way. And she seems to be there completely on her own merits. She seems to be the best receiver that they could get for the team. The little clips I saw her running like really well against an offensive line and getting brought down hard. And she's not exactly a delicate princess, but she's not a guy claiming to be a woman. And I wanted to do an episode on that simply because I just want to say I think that's just fantastic. I think it's wonderful. This is exactly precisely my philosophy, is that is that everybody should be allowed to compete, and I'm not anti-woman or anti-woman competition. What I am saying is that the standards for male sports are higher than the standards for female sports. So if you have a male getting into female sports, that's cheating essentially. But if you have a woman who's good enough to play in the male sporting division, that's exceptional athleticism, and I wish her nothing but the best.
I wonder, because I was just reading a story, sadly not about tennis at all, but about Serena Williams. So, 90% of the stories about the Williams sisters are having very little to do with the game of tennis. Mm-hmm. This one had to do with some cat suit outfit that she had that they wouldn't let her wear in a tournament. It was, it was like a body leotard that was all black.
One of the Nike
Catwoman suit.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Good.
But anyway, I'm wondering, because I caught a side view of her bicep and the tricep, and I was thinking, wonder how she would do against the best male players in the world.
They would destroy her.
I know they play mixed doubles, but
they
I mean,
would destroy her. I mean, unless the situation has changed dramatically.
I mean, Billie Jean King only had to play that lousy old man, Bobby Riggs.
This is my point. Bobby Riggs.
Who was like drinking and smoking on the court.
Yeah, I'll never forget this. I remember the battle of the sexes and how everybody in the school was all amped up about it. The boys were going to win, the girls were going to win, and when the woman won, we were just utterly, just in disbelief, and appropriately so, because Billie Jean King was the best female tennis player in the world at her prime.
It was really elder abuse.
Yeah, Bobby Riggs had been for 15 years, who did it as a running joke. And my understanding is that they actually had an agreement that Billie Jean King was going to win regardless. Now, you could say maybe Billie Jean King didn't play her best game or whatever, but I mean, just the fact that
you had to keep it close to keep the PR value up. Yeah.
Yeah. So I don't mean any disrespect by this in the slightest. This is why I want to do this episode.
Okay.
It's just I'm a big believer in accepting truth as truth is, and the physical differences between men and women when you get to top tier athletics is a fundamental truth that you can't deny. That's not to say there's not several million, 20 million, 30 million women in this country who could kick my ass. But
and a good fraction of those probably want to.
My trainer
probably
want to. My trainer was a Tai Chi boxer, not Tai Chi, Muay Thai, and she could undoubtedly kick my ass. But if you were to take the average, I don't need to get into this.
Sure.
I've seen skinny teenage boys lift luggage that pretty beefy women just couldn't get off the ground. It's just difference in muscle structure.
By the way, Steve, before you go and talk about your episodes, I asked our right angle group over at MeWe.com. If you haven't joined that yet, please do. It's we're well up over 1,000 members now.
Nice.
And I said that
I tried to join the other day and I couldn't find the group. I finally remembered to reload the app on my iPad. I was sitting on the sofa. I was goofing around. I thought, I've got MeWe here. Why am I not on there? And I looked for the group and I couldn't find it. So maybe you need to email me an invite because I'd love to join.
I know the administrator of the group and I'll hook you up.
Thank you, sir. I appreciate that.
So anyway, here's Dan Bridgewater, and I'll just throw these out here, and if you want to do anything with them, fine. But I just want to let you know what our viewers are thinking about. Dan Bridgewater says, while the media has covered guilty pleas and flags, Trump's economic hardline has gotten China, Mexico, and the EU to the table. Isn't it interesting what they don't cover? And then Ralph Capera, who's a frequent commenter here, says that he wants to talk also about the NAFTA agreement and Trump's negotiating style.
Well, there's not much to talk about with NAFTA yet because basically what we have is an agreement that we're going to agree. There aren't a whole lot of details yet. I covered this morning on the PJM Live blog. There's some good in there. There's some bad in there. We just overall we don't know what it's going to be yet.
Yeah, I read some of the details of it, and because I really don't know what's in NAFTA itself, I'm not sure how this compares. Because I was just a small child when NAFTA was agreed to. North American Free Trade Agreement, by the way. Aaron Walker, for the win here, says, it's the NAFTA math. I like that a lot. And then, let's see. Here's somebody helping somebody else who doesn't know how to use MeWe. Tiger Woods being asked by a reporter to weigh in on President Trump and getting lambasted in the mainstream media for giving a benign answer. I believe Woods said something to the effect of, we should respect the presidency. Why does everything have to be about race and politics? And then...
Because that's the only way they can win.
That's right.
That's why.
Arizona Denizen, which I'm sure is his given birth name, says...
I would laugh, but then, of course, there's reality winner, right?
Right.
And
you've just
so
won 5 years in jail.
If your last name was Denizen, what would you name your baby? But anyway, Arizona Denizen, he, she, it, they, they, says, I'm sure every government's espionage unit has a copy of Clinton's bathroom server email stream.
Oh, yeah.
The real question is, why hasn't Attorney General Sessions acted upon her treason? Is there some elaborate backroom plan being hatched?
this is my constant. That's something I think about all the time.
Sessions
I
was
keep
just a
thinking
bad
that
pick.
somebody's going to walk out with with a forklift full of subpoenas, but that's just wishful thinking. I don't think that's going to happen. I just don't think.
Well, I mean, James Comey walked out with a forklift full of data and basically said, well, we know what kind of person she is, so we're just going to let her go.
Yeah. And, the Reagan years were awesome. I wouldn't take him back for anything. But, there were some less good aspects to his administration, and Jeff Sessions was pretty much the guy who said, you know what, let's pick all the worst parts of the Reagan administration and bring them out into the 21st century.
Hooray.
Don't like this guy.
Well, we appreciate our members chiming in, and while we don't always choose your topics, and by don't always I mean never choose your topics, no, occasionally.
But here, I just got to address a couple of them.
That's right. I wanted you to know that that we hear you, that we care, not that we care, but we care. So
we want to appear to care.
That's right.
And we hope we fooled you.
That's
completely.
So, and we've gotten pretty good at faking authenticity, sincerely. Stephen Green, you also might do an episode this week. What would you like to talk about?
I think the three of us, well, you don't know what an intervention is, right? When a friend of yours or a relative has some debilitating addiction to something horrible, and
I've been through 13 of them.
Yeah, and you say you're going to throw them a surprise party or something, whatever. You trick them into showing up at the place. You lie to them, and
I was
all
the subject
their
of 13.
friends and loved ones are there, and you intervene on their behalf, and everyone goes around in the circle and explains how, without any accusatory language or anything like that, but how their addiction has affected us personally, and just to in the gentlest and kindest terms possible. Again,
so Bill and I are both wondering which one of us is the subject of this intervention.
Again,
I'm not wondering at all.
In a properly done intervention, you don't point any fingers, you don't use any swear words, there's no accusations, you just express how the other person's behavior has affected you personally. And so I think it's time for the three of us to stage an intervention with the people who make DC Comics movies and ask why they all suck.
Okay.
There's the reason this comes up today is Hollywood Reporter had a piece. They've had this Joker movie in the works. And I was kind of excited about it because a standalone Joker movie could have some real potential, and it stars Joaquin Phoenix, who is an interesting actor and maybe a good choice for this role. But Hollywood Reporter,
somebody who's not yet committed suicide.
Yes, always a plus. Hollywood Reporter says that Alec Baldwin has been hired to play Bruce Wayne's father. This is before Bruce becomes, Batman.
Who gets shot in the first scene.
Yeah, and he's going to play Bruce Wayne's dad when he was still alive and running Wayne Enterprises, and Alec Baldwin is going to play him as Donald Trump.
No.
It kind of answers your own question, doesn't it?
Yeah.
And I think, frankly, Alec Baldwin is old enough to play Bruce Wayne's great-grandfather.
Great-grandfather. So we're going to talk about this because we have two great examples of comics movies done well and done almost uniformly poorly on the part of Marvel Comics and DC. And I want to talk about this because it's become a really important part of our popular culture in the last 10 years or so. And why does one keep getting it right and one keep getting it wrong?
Okay. Well, and it just goes back to, and I'm sure I'm going to butcher this line, but it goes back to that Avengers movie, which
This is
not
what I was
DC
going to
Comics.
ask you about in the
Yeah.
actual segment. Yeah.
Goes back to that Avengers movie moment in the airplane where Captain America says something to the effect of, "I know God, I'm pretty sure he doesn't dress like that."
Yes, and the other great Captain
Loki
America
or
line,
whatever.
From the Avengers, and you did a segment on this at the old network, was when Agent Coulson gives Cap his new uniform and says, "I redesigned it," and it's total flag colors, red, white, and blue, big and bold. And Cap says, "Don't you think this is a little old-fashioned?" And Coulson says, "We could use a little old-fashioned right now," or words to that effect. And I think maybe that's the secret as to why Marvel succeeds, and I want to talk about why DC doesn't.
Oddly enough, that's also a line that Steve uses frequently with his bartender.
I do.
We could use a little old-fashioned. Right?
No, I could use a large old-fashioned.
That's right. Venti. So here's there are a lot of stories that obviously caught my interest this week, but one that was kind of not a big deal nationally that I noticed is that the little state of Rhode Island has found an interesting way of dealing with the opioid crisis. And I think, that for several weeks, remember how it was like always like that was, or months maybe, it was in the headlines all the time, this opioid crisis, it's an epidemic and everything. And then all of these much more important issues about, what the president tweeted and whether the flags were lowered at the appropriate time, all of that has supplanted any concern we have about opioid crises. But anyway, Gina Raimondo, who's the governor of Rhode Island, got behind this plan that basically said, when an addict is booked and checked into a prison, we're going to immediately begin administering one of 3 different substitute drugs, essentially. There's methadone, and then there's a couple of others that I hadn't heard of before, whose names escape me now.
Bath salts.
Yeah, no, well, it's not that. This is the remedy, that they're going to administer, and basically it is this. They're going to give them another drug that does not have as devastating an effect on them and helps to keep back the cravings for the opioids or the opium that they were taking. And then even when they get out of prison afterward, they can stop by this place and get a dose. And what they're showing is, in early results, that the number of post-prison deaths from overdose has dropped precipitously. Now, admittedly, the sample group is relatively small. It was like 25 deaths one year and 11 the next year, or 9 the next year, something like that. But it very quickly seemed to have had an effect. Now, other states are interested, and some states are experimenting with various versions of this. But I thought this is a fascinating idea, and how do we who just discussed the whole idea of the purpose of prison and incarceration and reform and, all of that last week on Right Angle, how do we look at this issue of saying we're going to buy drugs for drug addicts and we're going to give them drugs in prison, and then after they get out, we're going to give them more drugs with the hopes that they don't overdose. So it's not like, hey, we think we're going to get them completely off of drugs. The idea is to prevent them from dying. And, they have a couple of little anecdotes in the piece that I read about guys who now have jobs as landscapers or whatever. They've been able to hold down a job, but they go in and do this. So I just thought that's a fascinating idea.
It's a good follow-up to your story from last week, too.
Yeah. So I don't know why I guess I should. I can say why. From very early on, when I was pastor of a little church, I found significantly more sense of purpose in going to prisons and then talking to people after, when they weren't in prison, in between prison bouts, than I probably did at any time when I was inside the church building. And that's not to slight what happened inside the church building. It was just that I found it very rewarding to be able to go in and speak with people in prisons. And so I have a lot of connection with those kind of folks. And so I've seen enough of the recidivism and the revolving door of that, and I've seen enough of the drug use on the streets and stuff like that to know that we haven't yet found a good way of handling this. And I guess part of this is a little piece of republicanism, a little piece of federalism, the saying, hey, look at this. Rhode Island is trying something, and other states are interested. Now, in the story, they also mentioned, by the way, that somebody's saying, well, the federal government ought to fund all this. And I thought, I don't know. Why don't we let the states play around with this a little longer? Anyway.
Why don't we just erase that sentence from the English vocabulary? Let's just strike it. The federal government ought to fund all this. That sentence is a non sequitur, means nothing. You will never utter that sentence again.
Well, it's one of those deals, Bill, where they're like, hey, this looks like it's working to a limited extent. Let's throw a bunch of money at it so it can really fail big time.
Or we got to throw the federal money at it so that it becomes an ongoing, never-ending program instead of something with a success that can then someday hopefully be terminated.
Yeah. Well, and I think you're right, because if Rhode Island finds out in 3, 4, 5 years that the results they're getting aren't what they had hoped, they'll kill the program.
Yeah. But if they're getting federal money,
never will.
Never dies. It's immortal.
That's right. Anyway, I thought that might be a fun topic in the sense that anything that has to do with overdosing and dying can be fun. And before we go, Bill, am I allowed to leak my potential upcoming little project that I did the other day?
Yes, please do.
For those of you who are members, the other day I got a chance to interview a couple of our faithful friends from years gone by, Fritz and Todd Edmonds. Todd has invented a device called the stairwell elevator, and he did it because of his brother Fritz. And I'm not going to go into the details of the story, but I got a chance to sit down and interview them for a while, and we're going to post that, what is it, maybe later this week?
Yeah.
I can't wait to see it.
So we'll post that later this week. It's an American story, and I think you're really going to enjoy it. So just kind of stay tuned for that. It won't be under any particular channel. We don't have a thing for Scott Ott interviewing people. But let us know how you feel about it, if you enjoy it, or if you say, Scott Ott, just stick with your day job. Either way, that would be fine. Well, gentlemen, we better change our shirts right now and get to the business of making episodes of Right Angle. Yes, that's okay. Well,
we're going to run out of internet.
We did a whole show of John McCain. That's right. We've come to the end of the internet. We've scrolled all the way down, and this is it. So for Stephen Green and Bill Whittle, I'm Scott Ott. Thanks to the members at BillWhittle.com for making Right Angle possible.